In 1935, a man born into the lowest strata of India's rigid caste system made a declaration that shocked the nation. He announced that while he had absolutely no control over being born a Hindu, he absolutely refused to die as one. That man was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. As the chief architect of India's constitution, he recognized a hard truth. Writing equality into law was insufficient. To dismantle centuries of systemic hierarchy, marginalized people needed a moral framework, an egalitarian religion. He spent the next 2 decades conducting a rigorous comparative study of the world's major faiths, including Islam, Christianity, and Sikhism. He ultimately eliminated them from his search. He found that these religions either relied heavily on submitting to a supreme creator, required belief in divine avatars, or in practice still harbored elements of the very caste-based discrimination he was trying to escape. His final choice was Buddhism. He selected it not for its spiritual mysticism, but because it stood out as an ancient framework uniquely grounded in humanism, rationality, and a firm rejection of divine authority. But Ambedkar immediately ran into a problem. Over 2 millennia, traditional Buddhism had accumulated its own layers of orthodoxy, supernatural myths, and deeply pessimistic philosophies. When he examined the ancient texts, he found metaphysical elements that clashed with a scientific worldview. He began rigorously questioning concepts like karma, the cycle of rebirth, and nirvana as personal escape. He spotted glaring logical contradictions. For example, traditional Buddhism explicitly denies the existence of a permanent soul, a doctrine called anatta. Yet the texts simultaneously affirmed a cycle of rebirth and past life karma. Without a permanent soul, carrying karma across lifetimes made zero logical sense to him. If Ambedkar handed this fatalistic version of Buddhism to his followers, they would trade one oppressive system for another. To serve his people, he had to surgically reconstruct the religion from the ground up. He laid out this reconstruction in his magnum opus, The Buddha and His Dhamma. He used the text as an intellectual scalpel to strip away what he viewed as the irrational additions made by ancient monks over the centuries. His first target was the Buddha's origin story. The traditional narrative claims that Siddhartha, a 29-year-old prince, renounced the world because he saw a sick, old, and dead person for the very first time. Ambedkar called this completely absurd. No adult could live nearly 3 decades without witnessing basic human mortality. Instead, Ambedkar offered a historically grounded alternative. He argued that Siddhartha's renunciation was actually driven by a fierce political and social conflict over the water rights of the Rohini River, which served as a disputed boundary between 2 opposing territories. He then turned his attention to the 4 noble truths. He argued that if people believe all life is inherently suffering due to their own past life sins, it creates a deeply pessimistic worldview. That mindset actively discourages marginalized people from fighting their current oppressors. So he redefined the concept of suffering, or dukkha, and karma. He posited that human suffering is not primarily the result of spiritual ignorance, but rather of social exploitation, material poverty, and the cruelty of others. By reframing suffering as the direct result of systemic economic and social injustice, he took a philosophy of passive acceptance and turned it into a strict mandate for immediate, real-world social action. This mandate extended directly to the Sangha, for Buddhist monastic order. Historically, the bhikkhu, or monk, was an ascetic figure who retreated to the forest or a cloistered monastery to seek personal spiritual enlightenment. Ambedkar offered a sharp critique of this tradition. He argued that a monk who achieves perfect self-culture, yet completely ignores the miseries of mankind, is ultimately a selfish individual. Such a figure is useless to the propagation of a truly ethical religion. He demanded a new vision for the Sangha. The modern monk had to be a dedicated social servant who stays in the world, living among the laity as their friend, guide, and philosopher. This radical shift weaponized the monastic order. It turned the Sangha from an escapist retreat into a frontline organizational model dedicated to community service and the spread of democratic equality. All of this rigorous study and reconstruction culminated on October 14, 1956, at Diksha Bhumi in Nagpur. Over 365,000 marginalized people gathered for what became the largest mass voluntary religious conversion in history. To ensure his followers didn't carry old prejudices into their new lives, Ambedkar administered 22 specific radical vows. These vows required an explicit structural rejection of Hindu gods, orthodox rituals, and the caste system entirely. They demanded a strict, active commitment to the equality of all human beings. For the participants, adopting this new faith was a psychological declaration of independence. By taking those vows, they severed the mental chains of systemic enslavement. The religion established that day was entirely distinct. He explicitly rejected alignment with the traditional Theravada, Mahayana, or Vajrayana sects. He called it Navayana, the new vehicle. It is a modernist branch of Buddhism built entirely on rationality, equality, and social action. The core philosophy of Navayana dictates that morality is not born from a social contract, nor is it meant to appease a deity. Instead, morality is the literal foundational structure required for humanity to survive and thrive together. Dr. Ambedkar transformed his search for personal liberation into a mass movement. He took an ancient philosophy, surgically removed its dogmas, and engineered it into a permanent, living engine for democratic values, compassion, and human rights.